In this next slide, in Module 8, we're going to be going over raceways, wireways, and different type of fittings used to connect a conduit. Objectives in this section is we will be identifying types of conduit and their applications. Before we already talked about thin wall and rigid tubing, and matter of fact PVC, but there's others out there also. We're going to properly bond conduit for use as a ground, installing metal conduit fittings, make conduit to box connections, identify raceways supports, identifying installation requirements for various construction methods. And this will have a performance test, which will be identify the appropriate conduit body for a given application. So what type of conduit will we use based on its application? Raceways. A raceway is an electrical channel or conduit used to house electrical wiring. Raceways must be installed, it must be grounded, and bonded per the National Electrical Code. Metal conduit is a circular raceway that can be used as a path also for ground. EMT, RMC, IMC can all be used as conduit. In this diagram below, this shows you the sizes of the conduit and what they call nominal. Nominal. Basically, if you're looking at the inside diameter of it, it's the same. However, you physically look at the pipe, they would look at a different size. So, in other words, they would say a half-inch pipe is the inside diameter will be the same, but the outside would certainly be a different size. A different size. EMT is too thin. That's why we call it thin wall. So EMT is too thin for threading and requires the use of a set screw or some type of compression fitting to join it together. These couplings you see in the diagram is a compression type fitting. When it's compression, there's a nut. Matter of fact, let me just do this. This was a nut on this side. This was a coupling. The coupling is any device, component, or fitting that join two other pipes together. So in other words, to have a continuous long run that is over the 10-foot standard length for conduit, they will use a coupling to connect two pipes together. So this is a nut. This is also a nut on this side. You slide the pipe inside of this, then you tighten down the nut. Matter of fact, there will be a compression ring that once you put the nut on, you put the compression ring on, then you would slide the fitting on, then you could tighten it up. And that compression ring actually put tension on the pipe, so make it difficult for it to come apart. So you would tighten it down. The same thing with this box connector. This box connector, this will be connected to the box itself, the terminal box, 1900 box, whatever box it is, a gang box, and this will be the nut with a compression ring for the fitting. Other types, again, compression fittings are typically used for wet locations, but the set screw when it's in dry locations. So again, if a pipe will be running outdoors, they will use the compression fitting because it will seal out, because it's a very tight fitting that goes completely around the tubing. It will lock out anything. The set screw basically just hold the pipe together. It's not waterproof. It's not watertight. Rigid metal pipe requires the use of threads. and fittings to join the pipes together. And it's available in steel or aluminum, either one. Plastic coated or rigid piping provides corrosion. So in other words, if they're going to bury it in the ground, it come pre-coated with some a plastic coating to keep it from rusting away. However, they have been using um, other types of piping, such as PEX tubing for electrical too, because of course it's very durable, it's flexible, and also it doesn't rust. So again, that's a very good way to use. IMT has a thinner wall than rigid piping and is certainly lighter and less expensive. However, check the municipality based on the use of it. So typically you would find mostly in commercial, especially if you're going to be outdoors or in, let's say, hazardous locations or industrial locations, to find rigid pipe is normal. PVC does not corrode, and it is easier to handle than metal piping because it's lighter weight. It's easier to join together. Basically, you just glue the pipe together. So conduit that's used as PVC, or um, it uh, has a lot of benefits. So, like in corrosive areas or wet areas or underground, PVC certainly is a way uh, to keep from having those issues of pipe rusting out. So it does not corrode, is easier to handle than metal pipe, but it is subject to expansion and contraction due to the temperature changes of plastic. And it cannot be used as for equipment ground. So if you're going to use that, you have to run a separate ground wire inside of PVC piping because uh, it's not a metal that can carry current. So PVC is available in two types: Type 1 or EB thin wall, or Type 2, which is DB thick wall. In other words, Schedule 40 is a standard, believe it or not, is a standard pipe that we use many times for plumbing. So again, they were color coded different, gray for the use for electrical pipe, but it's the same type of conduit. So Schedule 40, the wall thickness is standard size, and we call it, for electricians, we call it heavy duty. And Schedule 80 is extra heavy duty. Um, uh, if it's going to be in an area where they're going to be compression or something like that, is they will use Schedule 80. And Schedule 80 is basically double wall thickness. It is very strong tubing. So we only see that only in special applications, Schedule 80 in special applications. So expansion couplings must be installed per the National Electrical Code to prevent damage from temperature changes. In other words, the expansion and contraction can break the joints apart. PVC must be supported within 3 feet of terminations, and then every 3 feet to 8 feet, depending on the size of the conduit. Here's the reason why: because the PVC is very flexible, the pipes can be sagging, and especially if it's in a warm area where the heat temperature can go up, um, it will sag even more. So again, in that case, the clamps to support it will be closer together. Again, like I say, PEX tubing is becoming a very common one now. So the HDPE, um, so that's high density polyethylene, is a rigid non-metal conduit listed for underground use. Again, like I said, PEX tubing is becoming a very popular because it's extremely durable. It's almost indestructible. Liquidite flexible metal conduit. Um, if you got equipment that you need to bring electrical to, and you may have a disconnect box, but they use liquid tight, flexible, non-metallic conduit whip to go into the equipment. And it speeds up the connection, especially if there's some movement back and forth of the equipment. In other words, vibration and things. So liquid tight. And they call it liquid tight because it's designed for outdoor use if it's raining or snowing, or there's chances of water getting inside the conduit. Plus it can rust too. They will use liquid tight. The fittings is actually compression fittings also, and it is again designed to keep moisture out of the piping. There's also other types. This is flexible, that is not coated with rubber or plastic, and this is just flexible. We call it green fill, and they have their own special fittings too. And the fittings are basically the same type, but designed to clamp over this flexible tubing. So again, the tubing is the fitting. So uh, electrical fittings are designed for the very specific application and type of uh, conduit you are using. So this is one of the type of fittings you can find. Um, this is a female and female uh, connecting a, um, um, a flexible tubing where you see this clamp right here. The tubing goes slide inside, the flex tubing slide inside. They would tighten this up, it would hold it in place. And this is designed to take like rigid pipe or some type of fitting to go inside of this here. So again, this will be a connector. So combination couplings can be used to connect. So this, since it's got two females, it is a coupler because it joins two pieces of pipe together. So flexible metal conduit is available in both liquid tight and non-liquid tight types. So flex must be supported within 12 inches of each connection and every 4.5 feet thereafter. Again, it would be supported because it's very flexible and can hang. It'd be sags in the piping. Different type of fittings. The type of fitting selected depends on the type of conduit, like I said earlier, its location where it's going to be installed, and the installation method. Okay, if you're going to be installed to something stationary or something that can have some vibration or movement. So couplings are fittings that are threaded inside and join two pieces of conduit together. So in other words, this is a rigid. It doesn't have to have threads on both sides. It all depends on the type of piping you're using. But in this case, it's threads on both sides and is used for joining two pieces of pipe together. Couplings are available in various types for different types of conduit and applications. And we look at this. This is a coupling that got set screws. This is a one that's threaded on one end, and then it's EMT on the other end. This one is a hinge coupling. In other words, again, it actually tightens down to hold things in place. And of course, this is the compression type. This is that compression ring I was explaining earlier. Now, many times when there's, um, let's say, a fitting that goes into a box, like a pull box, and there's a lot of wires in it, they make bushings. And these bushings are designed to screw, once it goes through the box, they use the bushing. Once you connect the tightening ring on the inside the box, this bushing will screw onto the threads. So there's a nice no sharp edges, no metal to metal, or that can strip or damage um, the wires getting pulled through. So these couplings, just a protection of the wires, but it screws onto the end of the conduit connector in certain boxes. So again, that is a very common things in large boxes. Here's some other ones. Uh, Grounded, insulated bushing both protects the conductors and allow the connection of the ground. So in other words, when they're pulling a ground wire through a box, they can keep from damaging the wire that goes through this, where you terminate it into a box, but you would end up screwing set screw here, or just different types too, like this one here, or where you can tighten up the wire to make a ground. So this is connected to metal conduit, such as either thin wall on the fitting or a threaded, rigid pipe. And so they're running a ground wire or a neutral wire through a box. They would use something like this to make a bonding to a of that ground. So threaded weatherproof hubs. So a threaded waterproof hub, also known as Myers or hubs, are used for conduit entering a box in a wet location. Offset, that's another type. Usually you're bringing it's joining um, your conduit to a box, but it needed to have an offset. And that will save you a fitting like this. Of course, it's expensive. You're paying for it. But it saves you from bending an offset, especially a tight offset. So a lot of times they will use something like this if you need an offset between a box and the equipment and the conduit. Conduit bodies, also called conduits, it can be used as junctions, and a junction meaning joining a couple of things together, or a pull point. So again, um, they are more expensive than couplings, but they may be required in exposed or outdoor locations, or to change the type or the size of a raceway. The maximum number of conductors permitted in a conduit body is found again in the NEC table 314-16B. So here's the conduit bodies. It's nice to have this because it's got a pull, you got a cover that fits over it, where you can see and have a little loop of wire inside of it for expansion. But the type C conduit body is a straight fitting with a screw-on cover for the conductor access. So in other times, let's say you're joining two wires together, this would be a tie point right there where you can disconnect or reconnect the wires. Type C conduit bodies are used to provide a pull point and very long. So in other words, is that you can pull it, let's say 100 feet, you got a 250-foot run. So this might be installed in the middle of the run. And um, in that way, you can um, be able to have less pull from both different directions, and you would have less stress in pulling the wires, or make it a little bit easier because the resistance of that long distance would be cut down or cut down in half. Again, it provide a pull point in a long run, or one with bends totaling more than 360 degrees. Again, Again, you add all your elbows in a run and it's over 360 degrees, it's going to make it very difficult to pull. So putting one of these C-bites will be extremely helpful to reduce some of that friction. Other types of conduit bites, we call these L's or LBs uh, for box. So a type L conduit bite is an elbow fitting that provides a 90-degree change in directions. But there's many different types. Here's this coming in one way, making a 90 out. However, this one's coming up and going through. And you look at this one coming through and it's going, so again, like I say, we call these LB, typically LBs. Um, Again, many different, um, a lot of different designs. So various types of type L conduit bodies are available to provide access to the conductors from the top, either side, or both sides. This is a T body for pulling wires again. It's a junction point. This is an X. If you got a lot of wires going different directions, in 4 different directions, this will be a good one to use. You don't see too many of these that often, but they're out there and you can be ordered. And again, there's a cover that fits over this that's screwed down, and there will be a gasket that will sit tight just in case it is located outdoors to keep moisture out of it. Moisture and elements. Here's various different types of sill fittings again. Some of these, like I say, could be explosion proof, but they have a place where you can seal it up and or you can get into it for different reasons. So various of sealing fittings are used in hazardous locations. Like I said, when it's explosion proof, a very dusty or hazardous area. I worked in places where, yes, where there's a lot of dust and the dust, like in a rice factory or a corn factory, where there's in the silos, or where they have or just a very dusty environment. It can be very explosive because if it burns and got enough air and it's small particles, it can't ignite and continue to burn. So locate in hazardous locations to minimize the passage of dangerous gases and vapors through the conduit system. Sealing fittings are also used to make connections between hazardous, which is classified, or non-hazardous, unclassified locations. Lock nuts. If you got a terminating a conduit inside of a box, the end of that fitting will have a locking nut on it. And it's a ring that have threads on the inside of it, and it will screw onto the fitting. And it has to be, here's one thing to keep in mind, it must be tight. You can't just hand tighten it. No, you will make a mechanical seal. If you notice, each one of these rings have some little indentation on it. A lot of times it will, is the bottom portion of it will be kind of sharp. So when you tighten it up, you could take a screwdriver and a hammer and you tap it over to tighten it as tight as you can get it. And it would bite into the metal to make a very strong mechanical seal to the pipe for grounding purposes. So it must cut into the metal. And this ring we just talked about is this here, this ring right there. So this is the fitting. Well, this is actually rigid piping, and our rigid piping, um, it's pushed through the box. You put a locking ring on the outside of it, put another locking ring on the inside of it, and then we might put one of those plastic bushings on the outside of it. But before we put that on, we would tighten up this nut, that locking nut. and as tight as we can get it. Because if the box is painted, um, and it usually will be painted for environment so it doesn't rust and things, um, we actually want to break that paint finish with that sharp edge on that locking nut. Alrighty, supports. There's many different types of supports. There's the one-hole strap. This will actually hold the pipe flush against the um, whatever surface you're installing it. Here's a two-hole. This is very common because you only need one screw to tighten it down. This you're going to have to take a little more time because you have to screw in two screws. This is another type. This is standoff. Basically, is designed to take the pipe, um, stand it off from the from whatever surface it's going to be attached to. So the clamp attached to it, and the bottom of the pipe would be probably about a quarter to 3/8 inch off from the wall. That's why they call it a standoff. Here's another type for rigid piping. In other words, for the uh, EMT piping. And so there's, like I say, many different types of clamps they make. One hole, two hole, standoffs, and again, rigid piping, one hole. Another type of standoff is a type that is used for usually industrial or commercial applications where they use strut. And they would have a clamp that is designed to fit on this channel. This channel. This channel, like I say, the brand name is well, one of the popular brand names is Unistrut. There's other brands out there. So, but Unistrut has as the term that everyone uses, synonymous with this type of clamp or strut, Unistrut. However, all of them make the same way, and they make the clamps to fit this. It locks into this channel. So standoff supports are used to support conduit away from the structure. So this strut, this channel here, comes in different sizes, depending how far away from the wall you want it. I think the smallest is 7/8. Here's strut. Usually, we call this a trapeze. A trapeze. Um, and this trapeze uses unistrut with the special clamps, and they got all different type of fittings to joining things together using unistrut and special clamps and so forth. Basically, this is two unistrut back to back attached together, so I could put pipe on top of it and pipe on the bottom of this trapeze. This particular one is mounted to a wall. Again, there's all different types of ways of installing this type of channel, and it works extremely well. Extremely popular for almost any type of piping. It could be water piping, gas piping, electrical piping. So they make fittings and things to attach pipes to support the pipes. Now, again, that unistrut, if it's hanging from a trapeze, they would use what we call threaded rod. It's basically a rod that is threaded, or better yet, it's a very long screw. They come in 10-foot lengths. You can get it shorter than that, 5 feet, or you can get them very short. But typically, they will be 10 feet long, and you would cut it to size using either a porter band, a reciprocating saw, or even a hacksaw. Use it. But if it's in industrial use, we find beams where we hang it from. They use a beam clamp, and that beam clamp would tighten it to that beam. And this side here would have a hole through it, which is threaded, where you can thread this into it, put a nut on top of it, and on the other end would be connected to your strut channels. So beam clamps are used to support hangers. One end is attached to the beam, and the other end to whatever you're hanging it from. Raceways, again, is anything with wiring running through it. So a raceway installed methods varies by the type of construction. And this picture is showing you concrete and how it is installed. Again, there's a standoff, uh, the distance where they're running it to, but how they end up attaching it. So concrete blocks are nailed to wood forms for embedding in the concrete when it is poured. So basically, uh, the wood forms is what holds the concrete when they pour in it. Other type of methods of joining things together, for example, if it's in concrete, they would have a special box just for that. If it's in drywall, they would have special connectors for that also. So when installing box flush in masonry construction, the electrician should work closely with the mason laying the blocks, because if they mess up, everybody's job is messed up. So just letting them know how it's going to be installed and what type of fittings you're going to be using. And of course, we have to make sure that we put these um, masonry extension boxes on it before they start to work. So knowing how far it's going to stand back, they need to know that so they know how to build it. So the boxes are made up when the blocks reach the outlet elevation. Smaller boxes may be required extension rings to bring them flush to the masonry surface. Again, you cannot have a plug way back in the wall, so they have these extension rings where your plugs or switches will be connected to the extension ring. Here's another one for you can look at for larger boxes that do not require extension rings to bring them flush to the wall. The box is designed for that purpose. Matter of fact, this is like a double depth box. So you can bring it in there. We got all these other knockouts you can use. But if you notice on the masonry types, um, the box is going to be made a little bit larger because the connecting rings will be on the inside of the box. Now this is really kind of cool. Metal studs are becoming extremely popular today because the cost is less. It's faster to use than cutting wood. It's definitely it is flexible. It's I mean almost anything you can do with wood you can do with metal studs. So, however, would speed up things. They make special tools for the metal studs, and these tools for like punching holes at a location where you run your gun through, which will save a lot of time because if it's wood, you got to get a drill out and you got to drill holes through all the studs. Here, you're just punching, and it's extremely fast. So metal studs often includes pre-punch holes. However, you may need to go in a different direction or a different height or whatever. So you would have to punch one in. For example, there it is. And they put, if you're using um, this non-metallic cable, which is Romex, you have to put some type of insulation bushing where you punched out at, or what, because the metal can end up cutting into the insulation on the wires. So this yellow bushing, once you punch the hole, they have a bushing that is sized to fit in that hole, so you can keep from damaging the wires. But again, metal studs are extremely fast and easy to work with. Alrighty, wood frames, you have to drill all the holes. Many times they use thin wall, EMT, as they drill the holes through, just like they would do if they're using Romex. which is the non-metallic coating on the conduit. Nailing plates is required to protect the conductors where the wiring is installed less than an inch and a quarter from the nearest edge. So again, um, we put this on, in other words, you're going to be running the piping through here, the electrical through here, and they will put this nail plate to be able to, um, when it's close to the edge. So nail plates are also required to protect the conductors and all wooden members. Metal buildings, those prefab buildings, they're everywhere now. Conduit can be routed across the structure members that support the roof in metal building constructions as long as it is no less than an inch and a half inches away from the roof decking because it's metal, and if there's a problem and it shorts out, the whole building can be shorted out. Again, so it can be no less than um, 1.5 inches away from the roof decking. The roof structure of a metal building can consist of either beams or purlins or open web steel joists. So again, all these are need to know this depending how you install it and what type of connectors that you and hangers you're going to be using is really based on how the building is built. Because if there's no metal I-beams or metal trusses, that it may be nothing you can attach the conduit to. Um, However, if it's metal, certainly you can use beam clamps and things like that. So beams and purlins should not be drilled into because you're weakening the integrity of the structure when we drill holes in it. That's why we use that nailing plate for the same reason. Instead, the conduit is supported from the metal beams. If there's metal beams, they're using special anchoring devices such as beam clamps. There's other types too that you can find, especially if it's wood beams, that they have these um, lag bolts with a threaded end on it that you can drill it into the members without drilling holes in it, and then you would be able to the opposite end would be the size of the threaded rod where you would thread a rod into. So all conduit is rand exposed and must be plumbed, level, and neat. Again, that's what craftsmen will do, always making sure that it's plumbed. Plumb is basically the up and down, which is the um, vertical runs, and level would be the horizontal runs. Again, so we make sure that things are neat, straight, and level. These are metal trusses that's used in holding up commercial buildings. And as open web, we can definitely use beam clamps on the bottom of the of the of that web to be able to support different things hanging from the ceiling. Here's a strut, a unistrut, a channel, and with the special clamps. And of course, we call this the trapeze. Look like a trapeze from a circus that they swing on. That's where the name comes from, the trapeze. So rigid metal conduit is often required in steel buildings because the rigid is stronger and it's not going to be damaged easily compared to other types of conduit. Okay, let's go through some of these terms. Accessibility, able to reach as for service or repair, making it accessible. Able to reach as for service or repair. So in other words, when we're installing different electrical devices, it should be accessible. Matter of fact, if you're pulling a pull station where you got a large box with a lot of conduit going into it, it must be accessible because one day we need to check something out. You need to de-energize something or need to repair something. Having things accessible would make your job better. Next is approved. Meeting the requirements of a appropriate regulatory agency, such as NEC. There's other organizations out there. Matter of fact, if it's been approved for uh, for law or for codes, been approved, mandated. That's what they're explaining. Bonding wire. Bonding wire is a wire used to make a continuous ground path between equipment and a ground. So a bonding, where they would, when the power comes into the building, that grounding wire, they would take that and they would connect it to the water pipe and the gas pipe to have a bonding. They would run again a, a ribbon or either a heavy gauge wire to be able, if there's ever a ground, it would take it back to the ground to trip the breakers. Conduit is a round raceway similar to pipe, and the pipe it would be the rigid type that houses uh, conductors that houses the conductor. Next is exposed location, and the exposed location is not a permanent closed-in structure or a finished building. So exposed location meaning that it's accessible. In other words, that you can be able to access the location of things. Next is kick. A kick is the bend in a piece of conduit, usually less than 45 degrees. So anything from 0 to 44 degrees is considered a kick. In other words, just bending the pipe up to make a change in the direction. So, and a raceway is enclosed channels uh, designed especially for holding wires, cables, bus bars, with additional functions as permitted in the National Electrical Code. Again, a raceway. A raceway might be something that was installed after the fact, or it may be a raceway where all the wires in an industrial location is located before they drop it down. Splice is connecting of two or more connectors together. Okay, and tap. Tap is the immediate point on a main circuit where another wire is connected to supply electrical current to another circuit. In other words, you're just tapping into something, tapping in or joining something else to something else. That's tapping it together. Underwriters Laboratory, or we call better yet UL, is an agency that evaluates and approves electrical components and equipment. So in other words, something been made, typically it will have went through testing with Underwriters Laboratory to saying that this is safe. And if there were problems, they would make suggestions of things to correct those problems. Or again, they would go back to the manufacturer and let them know that I will not give you my approval. So you're going to have to work it out, come back to us, and we would come back out again to retest it. Wireways is a steel trough. Yes, basically is a three-sided trough and they have a lid designed for it that goes over it. Um, Again, these troughs, you could, depending on the location, if you got a lot of wires running uh, to, for example, in a high-rise office building, there will be raceways or wireways where they're actually taking wire and running it into a trough to be able to make it easy to to um, to run those wires, just to save time. Alrighty, first question. Information on conduit fill for various conductors can be found in NEC. And where will we find it? Annex C. Next question. Metal raceways and other enclosures are bonded to what? Let's go through each one of these. Is it bonded to prevent leakage into any electrical system below? Uh, that question really doesn't make too much. What is below? Prevent leakages into any electrical systems below. B says ensure electrical continuity and safely uh, conduct any fault current. To ensure, again, the question is metal raceways and other enclosures are bonded to. In other words, bonded meaning is grounded to. So B said, again, ensure electrical continuity. Continuity meaning that there's an easy path for current to flow and safely uh, conduct any fault current. In other words, because if it's metal, it can carry current, and if it's grounded, if something hot touches it, it will blow the fuse instantly, not energizing the equipment that you touch, you can get shocked from it. Okay, so then therefore C and D is certainly not the right answer. Next question. A fitting that does not require support is a fitting that does not require support. Let's go through each one of these. Um, A says outlet box. No, that need to be supported. You can't just hang freely in the air. So they usually screw to the different types of boxes, such as if it's a outlet box, it would be screwed to a stud, so it doesn't move. So again, how do we support it? A fitting that does not need to be supported, and it would be um, oops, a fitting that does not require support is an conduit body. Outlet boxes have to be supported. Pull boxes must be supported. Junction boxes must be supported. If the conduit does not enter straight into the box, you're going to need something. In other words, it's going to have a offset, or better yet, C, a kick is required. In other words, a kick is anything that's that's less than 45 degrees, and it would so kicking it off or moving off to be able to go into something else. Beam clamps are used with is it straps, standoff supports, framing channels, and support channels. Suspended hangers. Okay, so beam clamps. We got a trapeze, which is suspended hanger. Next question. When installing conduit in a masonry environment, it is best to use blank. 3 to 5 inches, length of conduit. 6 feet, length of conduit. 8 to 10 feet, length of conduit. Or 20 feet, length of conduit. The answer is 3 to 5 feet. And that's the end of this section.